Hello, welcome to Math with Beth. And this time we're going to get ready for geometry and algebra 2. So if you're heading into one of those courses, here are some of the skills that you need to be comfortable with before you go to geometry or algebra 2. So take a screenshot or pause the video and try these on your own if you can, and then watch me go through them. So first, evaluating expressions. What that means is we're going to plug in the value that's been given and then see what we get when we simplify. So for number one, first thing I'm going to do is take this information and plug 5 in for the x. Next thing I'm going to do is follow order of operations. Remember order of operations, PEMDAS means parentheses, exponents. But then the trick is the next thing you do is you multiply or you divide. If you have both of those things, you go from left to right. And then the very last thing you do is adding and subtracting. But again, you go from left to right. What that means is you might sometimes divide before you multiply. And you might sometimes subtract before you add. It depends on which one comes first. So in here, I do have something going on in the parentheses. So I'm going to start with that. 5 minus 4 is 1. This still means multiplication though. So 7 minus 2 times 1, and then 7 minus 2. For number 2, I'm going to start by bringing in that -2. So anywhere there was an x, I'm now putting that -2. Again, x following order of operations, there is parentheses, but there's nothing really happening inside of them for me to do. So my next step is exponents. So I'm squaring the -2. So remember, -2 times -2 is +4. I'm now going to multiply or divide, depending on which ones comes first. I have multiplying here and multiplying here. So 2 times 4 is 8 minus 8 times -2 is -16 minus 10. Now I add or subtract depending on what comes first. So 8 minus -16. Remember when you have minus a negative, they really both become plus. So 8 plus 16 is really my next step, which is 24 minus 10. Final answer is 14. Okay, number 3 is we're just going to start simplifying. I cannot evaluate this because I do not know what any of these variables stand for. So it's just a matter of what am I allowed to do to simplify this. This means multiplication, so I'm going to go ahead and distribute the y. When I do y times y squared, I really add the exponents. And even though you can't see it, there's really a 1 there. So y times y squared becomes y to the 3rd. Y times 3 is just 3y. I'm going to write that again just to make sure you can see it clearly. For number 4, we're multiplying a binomial times another binomial. So this is where you really need to FOIL, some people call it. I really just think of it as I distribute the x to both things over there, and then I come back and I distribute my -3 to both things so that everything gets multiplied by everything. X times x is x squared. X times -4 is -4x. -3 times x, and -3 times -4. And then if there's anything you can combine. Multiplying, you can multiply anything. But now that we're down to adding and subtracting, I can only add or subtract if they have the same term. So I cannot do anything with this x squared and everything else. But this -4x minus 3x, those are alike, so I can combine that. So my final answer is x squared. -4 minus 3 is -7x plus 12. That's as far as you can go. Number 5, same idea. It's basically foiling, but there's more terms going on. So foiling might be confusing. If you do my distributing way, it's not so bad. I'm going to distribute the 2y to all 3 terms over there. And then I'm going to come back and do the same thing with the 3. 2y times y squared is 2y to the third. 2y times 3y is 6y squared. 2y times a -1 is -2y. Now I got to go multiply everything over there by 3. So 3y squared, 9y minus 3. What am I allowed to combine? I have a y squared here and here, so I can combine those. And I have a y here and here, so I can combine those. So my final answer is 2y to the third plus 9y squared plus 7y, because -2 plus 9, and then minus 3. That is my final answer. Number 6 is a monomial times a monomial. So there's no foiling. I don't need to do 5 times 3 and 5 times x to the third. This is one term and this is one term. So I'm just multiplying these two terms together. When I do that, I'm going to do the numbers first. And then I'm going to do the x's. And remember, when you multiply exponents, you really add them. So x to the second times x to the third is x to the fifth. So that one is definitely different than 4 and 5. So make sure you see the difference. For number 7, there is nothing I can do right this second as far as reducing. Even though there's an x to the second, x to the third, I can't reduce them because this minus down here is locking these two things together. So either there's nothing I can do, or maybe I can do something with the two terms that are locked to kind of unlock something, which is what we call factoring. So up top, there's nothing you can do to a 5x squared. That's very simple. You can't factor that. You can't do anything with that. But on the bottom, there are two different terms that both have an x squared. So that means I can factor out an x squared. Factoring out really means dividing. So when I divide out an x squared from an x to the third, I have x. And when I divide x to the second from x to the second, I just have a 1, but it was a minus, so minus 1. Now that we have kind of freed those two x's out here, now they can get reduced. So my final answer is 5 on top, x minus 1 on the bottom. Keeping in mind, though, that since we have an x on the bottom, there is an x we don't want it to be. If this x was 1, 1 minus 1 is 0, and that would be bad. And then going back to how it started, 0 would also be bad, because 0 minus 0 is 0. So I'll probably do a whole nother video on this, but just to kind of jog your memory a little bit, there are sometimes domain restrictions, which means x's we don't want. So in this problem, we wouldn't want x to be 0 or 1. So again, I'll probably do a whole video on domain restrictions if you need it, because I know that was fast. Okay, 8, all we're doing is simplifying this, so just do what it says. But remember that you need to do order of operations, and as I told you a minute ago, the M and the D and the A and the S actually go together as one step. If you have them both, you go left to right. So a lot of people get this one wrong because they want to multiply first. There's no parentheses, there's no exponent, so everyone thinks now we multiply. No, now we multiply or divide, and if we have both, we go left to right, which means in this problem, our first step would be 8 divided by 2. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. Now we're here. I definitely would have to multiply before I do any adding and subtracting. So now I'm here. Finally, I'm at the last step, which is add or subtract. If you have them both, go left to right. So I have to subtract before I add. 12 minus 2, and then 10 plus 3. Okay, so more on order of operations if you need it. I'm sure I'll do a video all about order of operations. All right, number 9 and 10, we're just solving for x. So how do we get the x by itself? So in number 9, I need to get that 12 and that 3 out of the way. We always move the stuff being added or subtracted before stuff being multiplied. So I'm going to subtract 3 first. And that leaves me here. 12x means 12 times x. So to move the 12, we divide. Number 10, I have x's this time on both sides of the problem. I'm trying to get it all by itself. So I definitely need to move one of them so all the x's are together. I always move the smaller amount of x's. So in this case, that would be the 4x. Since I'm trying to move this whole thing, I'm not going to divide by 4 because that would only get rid of the 4. I want to move this whole 4x. So since it's a positive 4x, I move it by subtracting. So now we're here. Now this looks very similar to number 9. I'm going to get rid of that -2 first. And then finally get rid of the 5 by dividing. All right, that was a quick introduction to the things you need to remember before you take geometry and algebra 2. If there's certain things that I didn't show that you need help on, or some of these that you want an individual video on, please comment below. Otherwise, I hope that helped, and I will see you next time. Bye.